Mr. Alessandro Kilpatrick from the Climate Change Secretariat, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Luca. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure for me to welcome you to the closing of the thematic tracks and the formal closing of the Africa Climate Week 2023. Let me start with a thank you to the government of Kenya for giving us a platform, and to our partners, the World Bank Group, United Nations Environment Programme, United Nations Development Programme, the African Union, and the African Development Bank. Thank you all for your collaboration on the design and delivery of our thematic track discussions here in Nairobi. In this session, I will provide a brief overview of what was discussed across the 4 thematic tracks during this Climate Week, and give you a bird's-eye overview of what were the key takeaways from these core discussions. We will then hear from our partners on top priority actions and solutions to be considered as contributions from this Climate Week to the global stocktake to take place at COP28. I will then hand over to my colleague Cecilia Nyenga, Director of Intergovernmental Support and Collective Progress at UN Climate, and our host government of Kenya, for a brief formal closing of this Climate Week. I will kindly ask our representatives from our partners to join us in the stage, whilst I'll be starting providing a brief overview of the thematic track discussions. As we know, we had 4 thematic tracks in this Climate Week, and the first thematic track was focused on energy and industry. Track 1 showcased the opportunities and discussed challenges related to the energy transition on the continent. Sessions under this track were very well attended, as in the entire Climate Week, with many stakeholders always present in the room at all times. We heard during this track discussions that big targets, long-term strategies, and ambition are critical to guide the energy transition. This needs to be reflected in nationally determined contributions and long-term low-emission development strategies. Financial solutions that reduce the cost of capital and allow for easier access need to be scaled up to ramp up renewables. In some countries, we heard lack of regulatory and transparent frameworks hamper progress, so clear policies are needed. Critical minerals, if managed properly, hold great potential for resource-rich countries on this continent. It is also clear from the discussions that local empowerment is essential to ensure a successful, just energy transition. We heard of many initiatives, activities, and collaborative models of partnership emerging on and for the continent towards ensuring that energy transition that is just, inclusive, and sustainable. Furthermore, the track explored the important and cross-cutting role finance plays in the energy transition. This transition requires finance at scale. The sources, quality, form, and purpose of this finance matter. It is also important, as we heard, to ensure that the broad transition of energy and distributed access is considered and receives adequate finance to ensure this transition. Finally, in this track, we spoke about the benefits and challenges of carbon markets as one potential source of finance to enable the energy transition on the continent. And we learned that Africa is well placed to leverage and build upon existing experience and capacities to benefit from carbon markets. Excuse me. Coming up to track 2, which focus on cities, settlements, infrastructure, transparent ways, was recognized as decisive sectors in promoting the system transformation necessary to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. Robust discussions were held in all our track 2 sessions, where we heard that African subnational governments have the plans and the projects to translate national climate change targets into effective local policies and action on the ground. Climate actions should be tailored to the needs of local communities, and here in Africa, 86 cities have comprehensive adaptation and mitigation plans. 56 city-scale projects are currently being supported, and 280 million euros are committed as direct finance. But more still needs to be done. Increased grant funding needs to be made available for local projects already developed by African cities, regions, and towns. This doesn't just benefit communities. It plays a central role in strengthening NDCs in 2024 and beyond. The track 2, took a deeper dive into the role of the construction industry and buildings, which are responsible for 37% of energy and process-related emissions and 50% of materials consumption. We heard that the buildings and construction sector is not on track to achieve decarbonization by 2050. So the global stocktake process should recognize the built environment as a cross-cutting sector that can deliver the transformative change. Track 2 also discussed shipping, a significant part of some national economies. Marine greenhouse gas fuel standards and a maritime GHG emission pricing mechanisms were discussed, not just to green the maritime sector, but also to help grow economies. Green hydrogen investment can spur large-scale renewable energy deployment with collaboration across both public and private sectors. Energy, climate, and transport are essential to ensure the pace and scale is realized. Moving on to track 3, which focus on water, food, land, and oceans, the track kicked off with Africa's vision for transformative adaptation and long-term resilience, and then explore how to achieve this vision. Panelists acknowledge that Africa remains a hotspot for climate impacts and challenges, hence the urgent need to accelerate adaptation actions. Speakers highlighted the need to examine impacts on people, sectors, basic needs, and the economy as a whole. We heard a strong emphasis on the need to change mindsets and ensure that adaptation guides how societies, communities, and countries plan their future. This transformation requires bold actions accompanied by commensurate investments and agile policies aimed at integrated risk reduction, managing trade-offs, and leveraging multi-sectoral opportunities. Participants reflected on the specific challenges farmers face, especially small-scale farmers who play a critical role in global food systems and yet are particularly impacted by climate change. We were reminded that farmers, herders, pastoralists, and displaced populations in Africa are often overlooked and need to be better engaged. A steady progress towards transformative adaptation was highlighted, including efforts such as the Moroni Declaration for Ocean and Climate Action in Africa, the Blue and Green Wall initiatives, and even collaboration with local radio stations and community on early warning services. Long-term resilience in Africa relies on protecting what has been achieved through deliberate investments. For example, experts say multi-hazard early warning systems provide a tenfold benefit by anticipating and responding to climate impacts. It is also critical to leverage the potential of Africa's youth for changing mindsets towards transformative adaptation, local and indigenous knowledge, and wisdom, which works and is trusted by the people. Capacity needs to be built and strengthened to spur innovation and transform systems. Collaboration at all levels on and beyond the continent was strongly acknowledged as critical for success. Finally, for the last track, which is on economies, societies, livelihoods, and health, this track took a closer look at shifts in economic and social systems towards sustainable and climate-resilient development, centered on the value of human and planetary health. We engaged in productive discussions where we heard the need for economic models and scaling of financial instruments that deliver on climate, nature, economic, and social goals. Sustainable, innovative, and regenerative finance can point investments towards bioeconomy and encourage the regeneration of the natural capital. Africans act as guardians and stewards of the continent's vast natural capital. There are successful examples of African-owned bioeconomy approaches that can be scaled up to enhance and increase resilience. The tract also examined enhanced civic engagement for African youth, green and decent jobs, and skill building for a just transition. And the climate, health, and air pollution nexus. We heard that frontline communities must be put at the heart of climate-related solutions development. They must be brought to the table and listened to, as the ones who develop solutions often without sufficient finance or other resources. Across all discussions in this track, the need for finance to reach the local level was identified as a major gap. We learned as well that integrated action on air pollution, climate change, and sustainable development is essential to increasing well-being and creating employment in Africa, as well as to reducing cost and relieving pressure on African countries' healthcare systems. Finally, from this track, we learned that building a skilled energy transition workforce requires measures to both increase the talent pipeline as well as enhance the quality and availability of the education and training provisions. International collaboration is needed to strengthen curricula, educator capacity, skills, and occupational standards and skills as regards policy development. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a quick overview of the key takeaways from these tracks. But by sharing what we heard in the rooms in these thematic track discussions, I hope you all have a better understanding of the priorities of the region. Some messages were driven home over and over: the need for finance, the need for new approaches, the need for collaboration amongst all stakeholders, and the importance of a just and inclusive transition. I will now like to invite our partners to share their perspectives on the outcomes of these track discussions. Let me first please invite our colleague Richard Munang, Climate Change Coordinator for Africa at UN Environment, to share with us your insights. Richard, you have the floor.
The Honorable Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Climate and Forestry Kenya, all government representatives, sister UN agencies, partners, delegates, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. It is said that wisdom is like a baobab tree, and no one individual can embrace it. Over these past enlightening days in this beautiful city of Nairobi, the heartbeat of nations with tens of thousands of people from every corner of the continent and the world converge at this iconic conference center, echoing the profound resonance that when diverse minds unite, a forest of knowledge blossom. Bound by this shared destiny, Honorable Minister, we have envisioned a horizon where the shadow of climate change is dispelled by the golden rays of sustainable low-carbon growth. On behalf of the United Nations Environment Programme, we extend our unreserved appreciation to the government and the people of Kenya for being a hospitable host for this year's Africa Climate Summit, held with the first ever Africa Climate Summit. The Africa Climate Week, held here in Kenya, exemplifies Kenya not just as a beacon of hope in the fight against climate change, with a commendable 93% of its energy hailing from renewable sources and an ambitious goal to achieve 100% in the next 7 years, shows Kenya not only a shining example for the world to follow, but also as a beacon of hope. During these past days, Honorable Minister, UNEP with its partners led Track 1, Energy Systems and Industries, co-led Track 2 and supported Track 3 and Track 4. And in all these, we had very enriching discussions from nature-based solutions as a means to promote sustainability in African cities, to prioritizing nature-based solutions as the core for adaptation in the African continent, to enhancing investments in critical minerals that are due to increase by 500% in terms of demand, to de-risking climate solutions for clean energy transition, and at the same time close the $3 trillion finance gap, to the need to turn NDC's investments into investment plans, and to retooling our young people's skills, and to changing the narrative where the outcomes of the discussions in the sessions that UNEP led. But one thing, Honorable Minister, that came out very clear was that the common denominator is a whole of society approach, and tapping into the significant non-state constituency in the African continent. Our youth, who are Africa's powerhouse, who are vibrant and their ingenuity need to be tapped, came out very clearly. All these, Honorable Minister, will inform the course correction of the global stocktake outcomes. But as we conclude, this African proverb reminds us that even the best cooking pot cannot produce food by itself. The deliberation that we got from the different sessions and the insights that we got from the different sessions are actually our ingredients. They are our clarion call. They are our manifesto of our renewed commitment to reshape the narrative of climate change, being seen as a liability to be seen as a climate opportunity. And we must stir this pot together because we know that a single bracelet does not jingle. Asante sana.
Thank you very much, Richard, for your insights and inspiring words, as always. Thank you so much. I would like now to invite Mr. Charles Nyandinga, Regional Team Leader for Africa from the United Nations Development Program. Please.
Thank you so much. Honorable Minister, UNFCCC officials, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to share a few points that we consider to be the takeaways from this climate week. And some of these points are things that we've discussed in various tracks, in various sessions, and in various side events. So they may look familiar, or they may not look familiar if you did not attend the specific session itself. But here it goes. The Africa Climate Week has provided significant opportunities for many actors to discuss important issues we are facing on the continent and around the world. From climate finance to carbon markets and transparency to adaptation, energy transition, and the long-term low-emission development pathways. Even though the narrative has been that financing is not forthcoming at scale, as we all expect, a growing number of African financial institutions are positioning themselves to leverage funding for the climate action itself. And this includes, of course, upfront financing and the provisions of guarantees and the risking of options. So countries demonstrated interest in assessing carbon markets opportunities, with many countries in the region advancing in terms of regulating voluntary carbon markets. That is key to ensuring that community benefits from these opportunities and that they contribute towards green growth and sustainable development. At the same time, we saw strong push back from several civil society organizations advocating that carbon markets need careful consideration and are not necessarily a suitable alternative for the region. Any decisions in this regard, of course, should be taken in unison. African countries are also deeply engaged in transparency issues. The high-level policy dialogue on transparency demonstrated that transparency is becoming an unavoidable tool for policymakers. One needed to build trust with partners to enhance climate action. Countries, of course, also recalled their need to receive support from partners on transparency issues, partners such as UNDP who is supporting more than 30 Francophone and Lusophone countries in Africa. On adaptation, discussions are increasingly shifting to regional and transboundary approaches. So this is a positive step, as we know all too well that climate change risks and vulnerability do not respect national boundaries. Of the 47 national adaptation plans that have been submitted to the UNFCCC to date, 18 are from African countries. It is highly encouraging that African countries are taking the lead in this regard, and both the African Climate Week discussions and the Nairobi Declaration clearly shows a continued need for adaptation planning and a desire to implement transformative adaptation action. Energy access is also at the top of Africans' agenda. Africa's energy transition is fundamentally about ensuring access to clean electricity and cooking for all. Africa can drive our own development narrative, and with a talented young population, countries can support the next generation of leaders and innovators to develop solutions that address the unique energy challenges of the region. It is also clear that there are significant opportunities for value addition in critical mineral value chains. Africa possesses vital minerals for the energy transition, and instead of exporting them raw to other global regions, Africa can process, refine, and assemble components locally, promoting jobs and driving African sustainable development. Discussions on the long-term emissions development strategies have not only highlighted their environmental significance, but also underscored their vital role in championing social justice and economic growth and resilience. In Africa, LT-LEDs are more than strategies. They are a beacon of hope, charting a path towards a sustainable future and for everyone. Finally, it remains clear that meaningful participation of all actors involved and affected by climate change is key, and those most vulnerable and marginalized must be in the driving seat. So young people are continuing to call for representation at a level needed for them, as they provide an opportunity for countries and non-state actors to amplify their voices, priorities, and solutions. Critical insights such as the ones I have highlighted now that must be included in the global stocktake process. Thank you so much, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Charles, for highlighting all those opportunities existing in Africa and how to materialize in them, and how they can be an important input to the global stocktake. Now it's my pleasure to invite Mr. Raffaello Cervini, lead environmental and climate change economist in the climate change group at the World Bank. Please, Raffaello.
Good afternoon, Honorable Minister, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I would like to start by really extending our thanks as the World Bank and World Bank Group to the Government of Kenya, to the African Union, UNFCCC, for organizing such a unique, formidable event that started with the Africa Climate Summit and is ending now with the Africa Climate Week. This has really been a really impressive event, and I have to say that Africa is now putting a really high bar for the other regional climate weeks. So it's going to be interesting to see how the other ones are doing, but this has really been a great start of this year's climate weeks. At the World Bank, we've been supporting these efforts since its beginning, and we're delighted that we've been part of this effort as well this year. We've been kind of contributing to a number of tracks, particularly 1, 2, and 3, as well as kind of promoting the, in a cross-cutting way, the issue of climate finance that has had so much attention during this week. I'm going to try to summarize a little bit our insights. I mean, clearly, I'm not going to be able to make justice. There's been limited time to kind of digest and organize this material, but here are some kind of some of our takeaways across the different tracks, with perhaps some closing points on some of the cross-cutting issues. On track one, clearly energy transition is a very big agenda item. This has to do with universal energy access and affordable energy access and so on. And all of that requires an appropriate combination of fiscal, concessional, private sector and carbon market resources. Clearly there is a number of very important institutional issues to be addressed. But in addition, we found and we discussed with partners the challenge of being selective in the use of scarce concessional finance, in a way that we can target essentially the activities that have the largest impacts in terms of providing multiplying access, in terms of alleviating poverty, promoting innovation, and tapping, of course, into the potential renewables. Another very important aspect that has emerged is the making sure that we engage in with social at the social level with stakeholders to promote the just transition, which is a very important and delicate issue in the context of the African continent. Green shipping, it's another area where we have engaged, and I think we found that there is a very important potential that should be further explored on the potential of Africa to benefit from the promises of this sector, particularly in relation to shipping. We found also that in discussion with stakeholders there is a need to further promote data and evidence so that policies and interventions at the sector, at the project level, can be properly informed. Again, on the track two, another important area has been the development of sustainable and resilient regional networks for transport, which I think many see as a key driver for lasting growth of the continent. Electric mobility has come up also as an important issue, and that should be promoted and could be promoted through local manufacturing of equipment, including in particular batteries. And finally, on this track, one element that we found was important is to give enough attention to inclusion and sustainability in urban development, including through land use planning, to make sure that there is enough forward-looking attention to these issues. Under track 3, we worked with a number of partners on forest issues. And of course, there is a lot of expectations from the forest carbon sequestration potential. But I think it has been highlighted in a number of discussions that the governance of the carbon markets is key in terms of transparency and in terms of ensuring benefit sharing. And of course, forests, yes, they're a very important repository of carbon, but they also provide a wider range of benefits for local communities. So it's important to kind of keep working together on the data and analytics to ensure that we have a full understanding of the complementarities and trade-offs among these different type of benefits. Let me conclude with a few observations of a more cross-cutting nature that we found across the different tracks. So on carbon finance, we hosted actually an affiliated event focusing in particular on when we talk about private sector in Africa, really as much as in any other realities, but SMEs, micro, small and medium enterprises are really the engine of economic growth. And so we need to find ways to kind of empower and enable this driver of change to really have access to the financing that is needed to promote kind of a low carbon and resilient growth. And at the same time, these operators face particular challenges in terms of kind of cost of credit and reduction of risk and so on. So I think proper attention should be given to the specificity of the sector that can really kind of make a difference in the future of Africa. And finally, we had several good discussions on carbon markets, and we found that there's really a lot of dynamism, and there is a lot going on, particularly in terms of the potential for Article 6 implementation, particularly in terms of activities that are taking place to promote legislative and regulatory framework that can promote that. At the same time, we found there is a fair amount of realism. It is clear perception that it's one important element, but not the only one in a wider sort of toolbox. It's not a silver bullet. And what is key for that, for carbon markets really to deliver is to have a clear, business-friendly, and kind of lasting regulatory framework, bring down the cost, and streamline the processes. And of course, there is a lot of attention being paid to the important issue of ensuring transparency and fairness in terms of benefit sharing. Let me conclude with one final point on the sort of the cross-cutting dimension, which is looking at the sort of analytic approach to kind of come up with to strategic planning. And we found that it is quite important to look at priorities in a holistic way, recognizing the linkages, the trade-offs across sectors, level of government, and across mitigation adaptation. We've been rolling out a new core diagnostic, the climate change and development reports that we find to be a useful sort of tool to kind of promote this kind of holistic and whole of economy approach. And the feedback that we got from stakeholders that this is actually quite beneficial, both in terms of the analytical content of this work, but also in terms of process to really engage with the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Planning to kind of promote this kind of comprehensive view of the challenges, but also to serve as a platform for the LTS work that should be coming. So thank you so much, and again, congratulations to all the stakeholders and the organizers for really a fantastic and really inspirational week. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raffaello, for bringing into perspective also those cross-cutting issues that I think are fundamental also to be taken into account. Thank you, a big thank you to all our partners. It has been an excellent experience working with you and your teams on Africa Climate Week, and we look forward to continuing this collaboration at all of our regional climate weeks in 2023. 1 down, 3 to go. So looking forward to working with you. And please allow me to also thank those participants. It's amazing to see such a full room at the end of our regional climate week. So I think that shows the enthusiasm and the dynamism of the region. So if you allow me a round of applause for all that are here. Now I would like to invite my colleague Cecilia Nyenga to the lectern to moderate the concluding formal session of the Africa Climate Week 2023. Cecilia.
Good evening, delegates, Honorable Minister Rosalinda Tuya, PS of Environment, CEO of the Regional Climate of the Africa Climate Week, the Chair of SUBSTA, Harry Rels, all our partners, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Every good and successful event within the African culture calls for a relatively as well good closing ceremony. I'm really glad that we've come to the close of a very, very successful week. It was indeed a great pleasure for us to combine the Africa Climate Summit and the Regional Climate Week for Africa, basically to ensure that we fuse not only the political dimension of addressing climate change within the Africa continent, but infuse the technical aspects that are required to transform climate action into policy and into implementation. It is now indeed my great honor And as we said, and I really want to echo what Richard Munang has just said, I love listening to his sayings, a single bracelet does not jingle. And I think there's been a full demonstration of that African saying in the last few days in this hall right here. As we move to the closing ceremony of this event, and I will be bringing a statement also from His Excellency Simon Steele, the Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC, I would like to turn to the Kenya government and say that as UNFCCC, we were greatly honored for this partnership. We were greatly honored that you saw it rightful to invite us and to offer to host the Regional Climate Week within the soil of Africa. As Alejandro has said, this Regional Climate Week is actually the first in a series of 4 that we will be having as we move closer to COP28. The energy, the success that has resounded here on the African soil is expected to vibrate starting in a couple of weeks in the Middle East and North Africa region, moving on to the Latin America region in Panama, and closing the 4th Regional Climate Week that will be held in Malaysia. We hope that you have set a high bar, which I think indeed you have, and that the other regional climate weeks are actually watching you and will aim to accelerate that effort and that energy as we draw towards COP28. Allow me now, with great honor, to invite our minister, and we are really excited that you can honor us and come to this closing ceremony, to come and make the closing remarks and highlight the role of Kenya in the summit and the week and the road to COP28. I would like to welcome you, Honorable Minister Rosalinda Soipan Tuya, to the podium to speak to the delegates.
Thank you very much, my sister Cecilia. Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC, His Excellency Simon Steele, Cecilia Njenga, Director, Intergovernmental Process and Collective Progress, UNFCCC, Nicholas Svengingsen, Manager, Africa Climate Week, Harry Vrels, the Chair of SABSTA, PS Environment and Climate Change, Kenya, Engineer Festus Ngeno, the CEO of the Africa Climate Summit, Joseph Nganga, heads and members of civil society organizations present here, colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. The nostalgia for the first week is beginning to creep in. When I stood here on Monday to usher in the beginning of the Africa Climate Summit and the Africa Climate Week, I did not know what to expect, and I know many of us did not know. The anxiety was indeed palpable. But now, as we host this last plenary, how I wish we were starting all over again. Of course, the anxiety came with the fact that we were doing the first ever Africa Climate Summit, as well as twinning to also host the Africa Climate Week. I already missed the science, diplomacy, and development conversations of the Africa Climate Summit and the Africa Climate Week as we come to a close. Allow me to thank the UNFCCC Secretariat for accepting Kenya's request to host, as the host country for this year's Africa Climate Week. Allow me also to thank the African Union for allowing Kenya and African Union Commission to co-host the Africa Climate Summit, and for all those who made the events possible to run in parallel with each other. I hope we have been good hosts to both the Africa Climate Week participants and the Africa Climate Summit. Have we? Our sincere appreciation to all the partners that made the Africa Climate Summit and Africa Climate Week possible. The list of donors, philanthropies, and individuals is very long, and you all know who you are. Some of you are in this room. On behalf of the government and the people of Kenya, the African Union, the UN framework, and the UNFCCC fraternity, allow me to say thank you very much. Asanteni sana. Allow me also to, in a special way, thank the President of Kenya, His Excellency President Dr. William Ruto, for his leadership, guidance, and support as we prepared for this week. It has been many months of toil, diplomacy, research, planning, but as always, the President of Kenya, the leadership of the African Union, and the African Commission were there at hand to guide and assist. Allow me to, in a special way, to thank my colleagues in the Cabinet of Kenya for going out of their way and supporting various aspects of the Africa Climate Summit and the Africa Climate Week to make the events of the past week possible. The Kenya Defense Forces deserve a special mention. They turned over this venue, the KICC, in the shortest time possible with such military precision. I will also not forget to mention Excellency colleague ministers from Africa and beyond who showed up in large numbers to participate and support this initiative taken up by Kenya. My sister, Ambassador Josepha Sako, has always been there to co-chair right from our CAHOSC meeting in February 2023 to plan for this event. Our appreciation to the entire Secretariat of the African Union, the Secretariat of the Africa Climate Summit, and the Secretariat of the UNFCCC, local and international media, individuals and groups. You are all outstanding. Again, asanteni sana. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we have witnessed an extraordinary week of participation, listening, exchanges, cooperation, and certainly essential progress in our common action against the vagaries of climate change. The Africa Climate Summit realized many outcomes, including the adoption of the African Leaders Nairobi Declaration on Climate Change and Call to Action. Also, a pathway to a new global financial deal that includes at-scale and fit-for-purpose financing instruments and products, including also investment commitments, showcasing multi-billion-dollar worth of green investment deals in the continent across all sectors, including energy, nature, and water. Announcements on tangible progress on ongoing major continent-wide and global initiatives, as well as a clear roadmap between the summit and COP28. The Africa Climate Summit and the African Climate Week brought together about 30,000 participants, representing over 130 countries and over 400 side events, all encouraging greater climate ambition in all sectors of our society. The Africa Climate Week alone covered over 200 events and engaged around 1,000 speakers. The discussions enabled us to highlight the real and potential solutions and innovations that can emerge from our continent. Looking at these numbers, I now understand. I was in a side event with a colleague, former minister from Panama, and he said he does not know what to take back home because I think there's a climate week coming up, and he says that we have set the bar so high. So he says he has bad news for his colleagues, but they have some time to work it out to try and catch up. So that is encouraging to know that we put up a good show. And we are not bragging, we are just saying we are very happy and encouraged that you heeded the call for Kenya to come and be part of this great success of bringing African voices together. Ladies and gentlemen, with less than 100 days to COP28, the outcome of our week-long interventions here have accorded us the opportunity and created regional momentum, forged alliances, and mobilized crucial resources that will enable us to achieve positive and significant results by the time we leave Dubai. All the accolades aside, we still have a lot of work ahead of us before COP28 in the UAE. We cannot afford to sit on our laurels. You all know that the conclusion of the first global stocktake, whose report has been released, calls on all of us to renew our ambition and accelerate concrete actions to save our planet and its people. The outcomes and pathway that we have been able to achieve out of the Africa Climate Summit and the Africa Climate Week needs to be given effect if we are to realize the goals of the Paris Agreement of limiting the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. I look forward to moving the resolutions and outcomes, as well as presenting these outcomes from the Africa Climate Summit and Africa Climate Week at COP28 in Dubai. I am convinced that we made history this week. Thank you all for turning up. Thank you for showing up and being part of this history. I am persuaded in my heart of hearts that this one-week spotlight of climate change action on Africa and Kenya, the conscience of the globe, must have been pricked somewhat, and that the world and globe's engagement on climate change cannot and will not be the same again moving forward. I am convinced that our themes, driving green growth and climate finance solutions for Africa and the world, being for the Africa Climate Summit, and energy systems and industry, cities, urban and rural settlements, infrastructure and transport, land, ocean, food and water, being for the Africa Climate Week, will reverberate for years to come. Thank you for helping us and my ministry and the Africa Climate Summit Secretariat in writing of this climate change history. When Sweden hosted the Stockholm Conference in 1972 that brought forth the Stockholm Declaration, they might not have known that they would forever be entrenched, etched in history of human environment by parity of reasoning. I'm sure the Africa Climate Summit and Africa Climate Week, with its Nairobi Declaration, will be referenced to, will refer to many years to come. I will forever remain indebted to all of you colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. You have all definitely left an indelible mark on climate change action history. Thank you for letting me be part of it. You must all know that having gone through a week like this, all the highs and lows, concluding might be difficult. So maybe I just round it up and say, asanteni sana, God bless you all, na karibuni tena. One of the hardest things to do is African goodbyes, but I will end there saying asanteni tena sana. And just before I sit, I would just ask Joseph to stand up. Joseph is the CEO Chief Executive Officer of the African Climate Summit. Please help me to put a hearty hand of applause to Joseph for helping us put all this together. And my PS, Engineer Festus Ngeno, please be upstanding. Thank you very much. And the entire team, our Climate Change Director here, Dr. Pacifica Ogola, who I know is very well known to most of you here. My other team members, Agostino Neto there, thank you all very much. And the entire team for helping make this a success. And my sister Cecilia, thank you for holding our hand and making this happen for us. Thank you very much, Asanteni.
Your Excellency Minister, really a great thanks. I really, sometimes I feel like shedding tears. I say this from the bottom of my heart because when I arrived here last week, Wednesday, to join the UNFCCC team that had been here for several months, working very closely with the government of Kenya and the African Union to organize this and make sure that it was a success. You will recall, Honorable Minister, that we were worried. And as soon as Simon Steele arrived here, he was like, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? And I told him, I am from Kenya. I am a daughter of the African soil. And I'll tell you, everything will be perfect. When I called him an hour ago, and I said, you know, Simon, I'm sitting in your office. And he said, oh, he was so excited. He was happy. And I'm going to be reading his statement now, but just to tell you that he left Kenya with a warmness at heart, with some joy. You should have seen us taking photos here at this podium. We were excited. He was really happy. And he left with a fullness of mind that Africa supports everything that the UNFCCC does, and that will be coming in a big way, with not just words, but with commitment and action, not only to COP28, but to the plight, to addressing the plight of climate change. So thank you very much for the warm hospitality. Allow me to read his statement. On behalf of Simon Steele, the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Climate Change Secretariat, I have the privilege and honor to deliver the concluding remarks of what has been an extraordinary week for Kenya, for Africa, and for the whole world. This week started with the Africa Climate Summit that has been incredibly successful. And allow me once again to congratulate the Kenya government, here represented by Her Excellency the Cabinet Secretary, Minister Rosalinda Soipan Tuya, and also by all your staff here. The summit has resulted in several announcements and pledges from countries in Africa and around the world. These announcements tell us a story of investment in Africa, but also of the capacity of Africa to develop and implement solutions to fight effectively climate change. The summit transitioned smoothly and integrated into it the Africa Climate Week, allowing the United Nations Climate Change Secretariat and its global and regional partners to deep dive into crucial thematic discussions. You have already heard from my colleagues here, of course, led by Alejandro, who delivered the takeaways from the thematic sessions, and in previous sessions about the thematic tracks and the key messages emerging from the over 200 events that took place here in the last 5 days. These messages clearly show to us that the week has achieved the 3 targets that Simon highlighted in his remarks on Monday. And he left Kenya knowing about Mambo ni Matatu. So he said, first, the week enabled governments to amplify their contributions and commitments. Jambo la pili, the second one, it has strengthened the regional bonds and collaboration. Na mambo ya tatu, third, that perhaps most profoundly and most important, it empowered local transformation. so that African nations can come together to COP28 in a united front to lead on climate ambition and climate action. The UNFCCC Secretariat is ready to provide any necessary support that would be required by Africa and to ensure a successful COP28. We all need to do our part. We need to work, we need to lobby our governments, we need to go beyond the short-term and shallow national interests. We need to keep our children and grandchildren in mind as we prepare to come with our common position to COP28 in Dubai. We need to negotiate for all humans, since no country will win in this life and death sentence if not everybody wins. The UNFCCC multilateral process allows us to have this consensual approach in order to address one of the greatest threats to humanity. Simon Steele told me to say that he personally felt very good vibes here in Nairobi. He said, including the conversations he had with the young people and the children and the ambition to be part of the climate action. The positive vibes of change are really rolling across the Africa continent. And he said, let's keep this constructive and positive mentality up. As you may know, at COP28, the first global stocktake will conclude. And we already know that we are not on track to achieve the Paris Agreement goal and objectives. Therefore, our response to the technical findings, which will be presented to COP28, will represent an opportunity to adjust, course-correct towards a sustainable future and a 1.5-degree target. And just to mention here that today and this evening marks the delivery of the synthesis report to the global stocktake. It's actually been released tonight, so I'm urging all of you to have a look at what it is that the technical dialogue of the global stocktake says and the key messages it will be taking to COP28. The discussion that took place here has informed us of the regional challenges, the barriers, the solutions, but most importantly, the opportunities for climate action and support within the context of Africa. We will bring these messages forward, and as we mentioned, we will carry them throughout the remaining 3 regional climate weeks. Therefore, the summit and the climate week have been important stepstones on the path to a successful COP28. 30th of November, as the minister mentioned, is round the corner. It's less than 100 days. And it's crucial that we keep this momentum going on climate change and the discussions which can progress and even further progress in the coming months. The Secretary General Summit, which will be held on the sidelines of UNGA, the United Nations General Assembly, the pre-COP in October, end of October 30th and 31st in Abu Dhabi, and the 3 more regional climate weeks that I've spoken about are just some of the several events and opportunities that will help advance the discussions that you have heard here about climate change and help all of us to create regional and global consensus towards successful negotiations in Dubai. Mr. Simon Steele says he feels very proud in saying that these 5 days have shown to the world. And I will say, indeed, yes, I have seen huge coverage across international media, across all the social media platforms. And this event was organized in a way and delivered in a way that it has set the bar so high for the upcoming events mentioned before. Well done, Kenya. Well done, Africa. And well done to all of you who participated. I would like at this juncture also to thank our UNFCCC team. And I'd like to call on Nicholas Venningsen. Where is he hiding? You see, he always likes to keep the backbench. Please come over, Nicholas. Nicholas, please come over. Yes, I think that's the humility with which Nicholas leads. Nicholas has really been the leader, the manager, the logistics, the spanner man. He's been doing everything. And I just wanted you come up here and allow me to say a big thank you on behalf of the team.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well done.
Thank you.
Well done. Nicholas, before you go, I'd just like to request the team, Nicholas' team, Luca, Alejandro, please, everybody who was part of Nicholas' team, just stand up so that everybody can see you. It was a huge team. Yeah. Thank you, you've done a great team. This is the same team that's going to be doing all the other regional climate weeks, and I really want to wish you strong energy and keep it up, because it's going to be quite a long trip around the world for you in the next few days. I'd like also to thank our partners of the Regional Climate Week. I'll start, the World Bank was here, the African Development Bank, UNECA, UNDP, UNEP. A real big thank you for your collaboration and your support. I'd like to thank our SUBSTA chair. Please stand up. You know, we have 5 bodies within the UNFCCC. SUBSTA is the subsidiary body that deals with scientific and technological support, and that's the chair, and he actually wanted to really come here and engage with you as we prepare for the subsidiary body negotiations for COP28, towards COP28. I'd like once again to thank all of you participants who came, all of you who have engaged as moderators, as facilitators, as participants, and all the support we've had with interpretation, the media, all the food we've had here, the restaurants, and everybody that has ensured. Actually, Madam Minister, the services did not go away after Wednesday. We've continued with the same level of support, and we really want to thank you for that. So once again, thank you. You have had major and successful outcomes here. We want to thank you once again. Honorable Minister, please pass our thanks and gratitude to the government of Kenya at its highest level. And we look forward to seeing all of you at COP28, virtually, in person. Create COP28 virtual sessions all over the world. And let's take the message and the outcome from this Africa Climate Summit and Regional Climate Week to the global level. Once again, thank you and safe travels. Asanteni sana. It feels like you're still waiting. Where is the music or the drums?
People will no see, then go here. Now money with the breathing, they scratch, baby. Make you do yeah. I just want to hold the punch, yeah. I no go fit to do one without you.